There is something strangely specific about Sundays, especially the kind that come with a holiday attached to them. Most people think of Sundays as a break, a tiny pause before the rest of the week demands your soul again. But there are some Sundays that feel different, too calm, too still, like the world is taking one long breath and refusing to let it out. That is exactly where this story starts. A girl named Lacey once told me about a Sunday she wishes she could forget. She never talks about it unless someone really presses her. Even then, she keeps most of the details to herself. It happened during a long weekend, the type where half the town disappears to visit relatives and the other half stays indoors doing nothing. Her neighborhood felt empty, and not in the usual peaceful way. It was the kind of empty that feels intentional. No cars passing, no kids playing, no random noises from lawn tools. It was silence with an edge, the kind that makes you feel like something is listening. Lacey lived near the edge of a small town. Her backyard backed up to a patch of woods that looked harmless. It was too small to be considered a real forest, but big enough that if you wandered in without paying attention, you could lose track of time and direction. When she was younger, she spent entire afternoons exploring those woods. She remembered climbing trees, poking at mushrooms with sticks, and pretending she was on some kind of adventure. But as she got older, she stopped going near them, not because anything bad ever happened. It was more like the woods changed. Or maybe she did. The quiet started to feel watchful. The shadows looked deeper. The air felt heavier. She could never explain it. On this particular Sunday, Lacey was home alone. Her parents were at a family gathering she did not feel like attending. She stayed behind to relax, binge shows, maybe nap. A simple plan. Around noon, she noticed something unusual. The woods were louder than normal. She heard birds, the crunch of leaves, branches shifting, and something else beneath all of that. A pattern. The noises came in cycles, almost like whatever was causing them was pacing back and forth. At first, she ignored it. She assumed it was animals, or maybe the wind. But the pacing did not stop. Every few minutes, it looped again, closer to the house, and farther, then closer. Not fast enough to sound aggressive, but not slow enough to sound random. The rhythm was too intentional, too steady. Curiosity eventually pushed her to check. She went to her bedroom window and peered out at the tree line. At first glance, everything looked normal. The same old trees, the same clutter of branches, the same sunlight filtering through the leaves. But the longer she stared, the more she noticed tiny details. Branches twitching in directions the wind was not blowing. Shadows shifting half a second too late. Something moving behind the trees, just out of clear view, almost like it was weaving between them. Then it started. The tapping. It was soft at first. A tiny sound, like a fingernail clicking against glass. Tap. Pause. Tap, tap. Tap. She froze. She tried convincing herself it was nothing important. Maybe a bug, maybe a loose branch. But then the tapping moved. A slow crawl across the window pane. Tap. 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 Steady and curious. Lacey felt her chest tighten. Someone or something was on the other side of that window. She lifted the curtain just a tiny bit, just enough to peek. Nothing. No figure, no shadow, no branches near the glass. The yard looked normal, but it felt wrong. The trees looked a little too close, like the whole tree line had shifted forward while she wasn't looking. The tapping stopped. 10 seconds of silence, then it started again, but this time from a different window across the room. Same slow rhythm, same patient tapping. She backed away, holding her phone tightly. She was about to call her parents or maybe a neighbor when everything outside went silent. Completely silent. No wind, no birds, no rustling. The air felt heavy like the entire world had paused. Then came the footsteps. Not from the woods anymore. They were behind her house, slow and steady. Each step pressed into the ground with this sinking weight, like something large was walking right behind the wall. Lacey felt cold rush through her. Her body moved before she even processed it. She ran upstairs, slammed her bedroom door, and locked it. But the steps followed. Not inside, outside, along the wall, mirroring her movements inside the room. If she tiptoed across the floor, the steps outside lined up with her pace. If she paused, they paused, perfectly synced, like whatever was out there was tracking her position. She tried to hide. She got under her blankets, even though she knew that was useless. Hours passed like that, heart racing, eyes wide open in the dark. She waited until she heard the sound of her parents' car pulling in. As soon as she heard voices, she sprinted downstairs. The backyard was still, calm, normal. No signs of visitors. The grass looked untouched. The trees looked like they had always been the same distance away. Everything was exactly how it should be, except for one thing. On the back porch, on the dusty wooden boards, there was a streak, a long, uneven line carved lightly across the surface, like something had traced a finger or a claw from one end to the other. The spacing looked almost human, almost, but not quite. It was just slightly off in a way she could not fully describe. And she said that small detail is what stuck with her the most. Lacey never spent another Sunday alone after that. Even now, she refuses to look out the windows facing the woods whenever that day rolls around again. She told me she can still remember the feeling of those footsteps syncing with her own. And she's convinced that whatever was out there that day was not an animal, not a person, and definitely not something she wants to meet again. Our second story comes from a guy named Julian, and the way he told it made it clear he still doesn't like thinking about it. He and his 3 cousins had planned one of those chill Sunday holiday road trips, the kind where you toss snacks in the back seat, argue about music, and pretend you actually know where you're going. The plan was simple. Drive up to a scenic overlook they'd visited before, eat, take photos, and be home before the sun dipped. Nothing complicated. But the trip took a turn before they even realized something was off. They were cruising down the highway, joking around and blasting music, when the GPS told them to take a right onto a gravel road they didn't remember ever seeing. Julian said they'd used this route before. Same starting point, same destination, and this gravel road never once appeared. The map insisted it was the correct way to the overlook. The creepy part was the sign posted at the entrance, rusty, cracked, leaning to the side, but still pointing toward the overlook. The 4 of them exchanged that awkward, "this feels weird, but okay, whatever," look, and turned. The second the tires hit the gravel, a hush settled over the car. Nobody said anything, but everyone felt it. The whole place had an odd vibe. The trees grew closer to the road, leaning inward like they were trying to hide something. The sunlight faded. Not like it was getting dark, but like someone had dimmed the world a little. Even their music sounded different, like the sound waves had less space to bounce around in. About 10 minutes in, they passed an old truck pulled off to the side. No plates, no windows, moss covering half the hood. The kind of thing you expect in a horror game, not on a Sunday drive. They made jokes about it, but Julian said it was forced. Every laugh sounded thin, nervous. The farther they drove, the more the road narrowed. The gravel shifted under the tires like it wasn't meant to be driven on anymore. Then the GPS signal dipped in and out. The map glitched, spinning, shifting, and at one point it placed them in the middle of a lake miles away. When they refreshed it again, the little blue dot jumped outside the borders of the map completely, off-grid, like the system couldn't figure out where they were at all. That's when Julia noticed something strange. The trees were repeating. He saw a crooked pine with a snapped branch on the right side of the road. Then about 5 minutes later, it showed up again. Same angle, same broken limb, same scar on the trunk. He told himself he was imagining things until one of his cousins whispered, "Didn't we already pass that tree?" And instantly the whole car went silent. They were looping. The driver slowed down, trying to stay calm. They debated whether to keep going or turn around. Eventually, they voted to go back the way they came. But when the car turned around, the road behind them wasn't the wide gravel path they'd entered on. It had become tighter, darker. The trees bowed in over the top like they were trying to seal the exit. The group stared at the road, realizing it only took minutes for it to change. Before they could decide anything else, the engine shut off. No warnings, no weird clicking or rattling, just a sudden dead stop. Every system went silent. They tried everything, turning the key, checking the battery, popping the hood, but the air outside felt wrong. Thick, pressurized, like the forest was holding its breath. Their footsteps sounded strange, slightly echoed. Even though the trees were so close together, the sound shouldn't have traveled anywhere. Julian said he felt watched, not in a dramatic, like "there's something behind me" kind of way. It was quieter, heavier, like something deep in the trees had taken an interest. Every time he looked over his shoulder, he felt like he was just a fraction of a second too late to catch movement. 30 minutes went by. The trees didn't move, but the atmosphere did. The forest seemed to be waiting for something. They all felt it. Staying with the car suddenly felt like a bad idea, a really bad idea. So they made the choice that people always yell at characters for doing in movies. They left the car and started walking. At first, the road felt endless. Every bend looked the same. Same trees, same dirt, same unsettling quiet. Then they saw it. A cabin. Tucked off the path between two trees, like it had been dropped there by mistake. Not destroyed, not abandoned, just out of place. The wood looked new and old at the same time, like time couldn't decide what to do with it. The windows were perfectly clean, but the glass reflected nothing. No sky, no forest, just pure black. And someone was standing in the doorway. A still figure, too tall, too narrow, its head tilted just a bit, like it was trying to understand them. It didn't move, didn't gesture, didn't step out. It just watched. Nobody said a word. They didn't even look at each other. They just kept walking, trying to act like they hadn't seen it. But Julian swears the figure's head turned to follow them as they moved. No shoulder shifting, no body moving, just the head. The moment they were far enough away, they sped up, Not running, because running felt like it would trigger something. Just fast walking with every muscle in their bodies screaming to get out of the woods. Eventually, after what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, they stepped out onto the main road. And instantly, the air felt warm again, real again. The sky brightened like someone flipped the world's power switch back on. Relief washed over them until they turned around. The gravel road they had just come out of was gone. No entrance, no sign, no opening in the trees, just an unbroken wall of branches and leaves. The group went back later with authorities. They tried to trace the route, tried to find the car, but nothing was there. No gravel, no truck, no cabin. Everything looked normal, like the forest had never been touched. People told them they probably took a wrong turn, remembered things wrong. But all four of them remember the same details, the same looping road, the same cold air, the same figure. And they all agree on one thing. Whatever that road was, it wasn't on any map, and it wasn't meant for travelers.
Our last story comes from a woman named Erin, who spent her Sunday holiday driving across the state to visit her sister. Long drive, chill playlist, snacks, one of those solo trips that feel peaceful in a strangely comforting way. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in warm colors, and everything about the day felt calm and simple. As the light faded, Erin pulled into an old rest stop to stretch and use the restroom. It wasn't anything fancy, just a small building with peeling paint and vending machines that looked like they hadn't been touched in years. Still, it wasn't completely empty. 2 cars, a truck, and a motorcycle were scattered around the parking lot. Not busy, not deserted, just normal enough. The moment she stepped inside the restroom, though, something felt wrong. Not dangerous, not dirty, just off. It felt like someone had been standing exactly where she was a second before she entered. The air felt too still, like the silence itself was watching her. She shook off the feeling and went to wash her hands. As she lifted her head toward the mirror, she froze. Her reflection was delayed. Barely half a second, but enough to notice. Whenever she raised her hand, the reflection copied a beat late. Erin frowned and tilted her head, thinking maybe she was tired from the long drive. Mirrors don't lag. That's not a thing. She leaned closer, squinted, turned her head slightly. The reflection turned too, but not at the same angle. It was wrong by just a few degrees, enough to make her body tense in one sharp wave of fear. She blinked. The reflection blinked after her. Before she could process it, the lights overhead flickered. In that split second of dimness, her reflection smiled. Erin wasn't smiling. She stumbled backward so fast she bumped into a stall door. Meanwhile, the reflection stayed perfectly still, staring at her with that same frozen smile. Then, slowly, it raised a hand and pressed its palm against the glass, not mimicking her, moving on its own. That was enough. She spun around and sprinted out of the restroom, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her ears. But when she stepped outside, the world was completely different. The parking lot was empty. Every vehicle she'd seen earlier was gone, all of them, even though she had been inside for maybe 2 minutes, tops.
The pavement looked cleaner than before, untouched, like no car had ever been parked there. The air felt heavy and oddly quiet, as if the entire place was holding its breath. Erin rushed to her car, locked the doors, and stared into her rearview mirror. Her reflection looked normal again. No delay, no strange expressions. She lifted her hand and waved slightly, perfectly synced. She let out a shaky laugh, trying to convince herself she imagined everything. Maybe the lighting in the restroom was weird. Maybe the mirror was old. Maybe she was just exhausted. She started the engine and pulled back onto the road, trying to put distance between herself and that place. But as she glanced at her rearview mirror one more time, her stomach dropped. Standing next to the restroom door was a figure that looked exactly like her. Same clothes, same posture, same face. Except the expression didn't match. The other her was smiling, wide, steady, and unmoving. A smile that didn't change even as the distance between them grew. Erin didn't look back again for the rest of the drive. She kept her eyes forward, hands gripping the wheel, refusing to check any mirror more than absolutely necessary. To this day, she avoids old rest stops, avoids strange mirrors, and avoids traveling long distances alone. Because no matter how much time has passed, she can't shake the memory of seeing herself standing in a place she was never supposed to be, and smiling like it knew something she didn't.